He thought he was about to be crowned a king of the underworld. Instead, he stepped into a room where every smile hid a loaded gun. The ceremony was supposed to change his life, make him untouchable. But a secret betrayal was already in motion. A single mistake, a forgotten grudge, a decision made by men who once called him brother. He walked in expecting honor. He never walked back out. So how does a man feared by everyone vanish without a trace? Keep watching. The truth is darker than the legend. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now back to the story. He thought he was walking toward honor. A new life. A future where his name wouldn't just echo in the streets of New York. It would be feared there. But no one becomes a legend without blood. And no one disappears without reason. The story of Thomas DeSimone doesn't begin with betrayal. It doesn't begin with murder or robbery or the infamous Lufthansa Heist. It begins much smaller. In a neighborhood where crime wasn't a choice, it was the oxygen people breathed. Before he was a ghost, he was a boy. Born on June 6, 1946, deep in South Ozone Park, Queens, Thomas was the youngest of 8 children. In most families, the youngest is protected, shielded from the roughness of the world. In the DeSimone household, the world was rough whether you were ready for it or not. His brothers were already drifting toward the Gambino crime family, one foot in the house, the other firmly in the streets. The men who came through the door weren't accountants or school teachers. They were wise guys, bookmakers, soldiers in the quiet war of organized crime. Imagine being a child at that table, watching men speak in code, envelopes passing like secrets across dinner plates. Money never spoken of, but always present. A world where respect could feed you, and disrespect could bury you. For Tommy, this was normal. Just life. Crime didn't look dark or immoral. It looked like survival. He grew fast, but he grew narrow, thin as a switchblade. 6'2" and barely 175, all bones and fury. People later described him as skinny, sharp, nervous energy tucked inside a wise guy suit. He tried to look older than he was. A pencil-thin mustache shading a young mouth that hadn't yet learned to smile at anything soft. There were no Little League photos, no graduation Polaroids on the fridge. Childhood passed him by like a train he was never meant to board. In Queens, boys grew into men the same way bullets move out of a gun. Fast, loud, irreversible. By 15, Tommy was already orbiting the criminal world. And then one introduction changed everything. Someone brought him into the circle of Paul Vario, a Lucchese Cape regime with influence, like a shadow spreading across borough lines. Vario didn't just run a crew. He manufactured men, pulled street kids up like weeds, trimmed them, shaped them, molded them into soldiers who'd bleed for him without hesitation. And Tommy wanted that. Not the money, at least not at first. He wanted belonging. Power. A place where a skinny kid could stand tall. No one knows exactly what Vario saw in him. Maybe potential. Maybe recklessness. Maybe a set of eyes that held no fear, or worse, no conscience. But he opened the door, and Tommy stepped inside like he'd been waiting his whole life for the invitation. Here, the story shifts. Here, innocence fades quietly into shadow. Tommy dropped out of high school after the 10th grade, trading textbooks for street corners, teachers for mobsters. He was a teenager in age only. His education came from men who made their living off stolen freight and broken bones. He learned how to watch without staring, how to listen without reacting, how to keep secrets like they were oxygen. But even then, even as a kid in a suit too big for his shoulders, something set him apart. He didn't keep his gun tucked into his waistband like most young wise guys. He carried it in a paper lunch bag. Imagine the picture. A young man strolling down a block with a bag swinging casually from his hand, like he's headed to a factory job or a schoolyard. Inside wasn't a sandwich. Inside was death. It was strange. It was bold. And it was Tommy. In those early days, he attached himself to 2 men who would define his life, and eventually his end. Henry Hill and Jimmy the Gent Burke. Henry, we know from Wise Guy, the memoir that eventually became Goodfellas. Soft-spoken, cool, someone who thought before he moved. Jimmy, older, smarter, deadlier, had hands gentle enough to tip waitresses $100 for filling his coffee and cold enough to strangle the life out of a man he once called friend. And Tommy worshipped them. The three moved like wolves, a pack where loyalty was currency and violence was expected. They hijacked trucks like they were picking apples. Loading docks, airport roads, warehouse routes. They treated them like hunting grounds. They learned who drove what, who carried cash, who carried goods. They never thought about right or wrong. Only profit. Only opportunity. Only dominance. These weren't Hollywood criminals with charm and witty lines. They were men carving their future out of someone else's property. At first, their crimes were petty. Goods lifted off a truck here. Cigarettes moved in the night there. A driver scared, but not hurt. The kind of crime people forget once the insurance check arrives. But something was growing in Tommy. Quiet, coiled, waiting. Henry Hill once called him unpredictable. Said he could laugh with you over breakfast and beat you half dead by lunch. Not for business. Sometimes not even for disrespect. Just because something inside him sparked. We aren't here to excuse him. But to understand him, we have to linger in this moment. A young man, shaped by a violent world, desperate to prove he belonged in it. Craving recognition the way others crave love. And so the wolf pack continued to rise. More hijackings. More money. More nights spent in bars where the lights were low and men bragged loud, beers clinking like gunmetal. Tommy started to feel untouchable. But a man only becomes dangerous when he learns to stop fearing consequence. And Tommy lost that fear young. The first murder didn't come with dramatic buildup. There was no mafia order. No motive. No strategy. Just a street. A stranger. And Tommy's voice saying two words that froze Henry Hill where he stood. Watch this. A man walked past them, unknown, uninvolved, merely existing. Tommy reached into that paper bag. Not lunch. Not innocence. A gun. No warning. No reasoning. Just a pull of the trigger. The stranger fell. Blood on pavement. No connections, no debts. Just gone. Erased for nothing. Henry later said Tommy didn't even blink. Didn't run. Didn't check pulse. Just slipped the gun back into his bag and kept walking like the world hadn't changed. But the world had changed. Tommy had crossed the line between crime and murder and felt nothing. This was the moment everything we thought we knew about him collapses. The boy from Queens disappears. In his place stands someone else, colder, hungrier, unbound by limits. And if that act shocks us now, imagine the shock of a world that would soon learn his name in screams and headlines. A street killing for no reason. A life taken because he felt like it. This wasn't business. This wasn't retribution. This was impulse. And impulse in a man like Thomas DeSimone was a warning shot from the future. Because if he could kill a stranger for nothing, what would he do for revenge? For money? For respect? No one escapes violence forever. Not even the man who dealt it so freely. And if you believe that, if you believe someday the world catches up to men like Tommy DeSimone, then hit subscribe. Men like him hate when we drag their shadows into the light. This is only the beginning. His rise has just started. His violence has only tasted blood. And the world has no idea what's coming next. The first killing opened a door inside Thomas DeSimone that never closed again. Where most men would tremble, he steadied. Where guilt might take hold, nothing grew. Some say he lacked empathy. Others whisper he enjoyed the power. Whatever the truth, it became clear that fear and respect, to Tommy, were the same word. And now, with blood behind him and opportunity ahead, he was ready for bigger things. The streets of New York in the 1960s were arteries, pulsing with goods, fur coats, cigarettes, liquor, electronics. Trucks were treasure chests on wheels, and men like Tommy, Jimmy, and Henry treated highways like open veins. They didn't just commit hijackings, they perfected them. Every move timed, every route memorized, every weakness exploited. One of the jobs that put Tommy on the FBI radar came in the autumn of 1966. A cold Manhattan morning. A truck filled with 187 fur coats, insured for nearly $200,000, the kind of shipment that makes criminals salivate. The driver rolled up to an intersection, stopped at a red light, thinking nothing of it. A routine pause. 2, maybe 3 seconds. And then a gun appeared beside him, pressed close enough that he could smell the oil on the metal. He was pulled from the seat, ordered into another car, told to look straight ahead and nowhere else. No names. No faces. Just a voice telling him where to turn, when to breathe, how long he had left if he disobeyed. Meanwhile, the original truck rolled away like a ghost, disappearing into the city maze. And when police found it the next day, abandoned in Jersey City, the fur coats were gone. Gone like smoke. Gone like coincidence. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No loose ends. This wasn't luck. This was precision. And the FBI felt it. Whispers started circulating. A kid named DeSimone.
Tall. Too calm.
A gun in a paper bag. Rumors said he wasn't just involved, he was leading jobs. And yet, for years, they couldn't make anything stick. They arrested him. They tried him. They even brought witnesses to point him out. And 3 times, juries couldn't convict. Hung trials. Mistrials. Not enough evidence. He walked free each time, smiling like someone who believed fate was on his payroll. And this is where the story becomes dangerous. Because men who slip through the cracks begin to believe the wall can't hold them. Tommy was becoming more than a soldier. He was becoming a ghost, visible when he chose, invisible when he needed. But his boldest move was yet to come. Idlewild Airport, later renamed JFK, throbbed with international wealth. Cash shipments flew across oceans like migrating birds. And one night, through a tip from a security guard known as Frenchie, Tommy and Henry Hill got wind of something special, a shipment of cash from Asia. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, sitting in a safe, guarded by nothing more than a key and confidence. No guns blazing. No hostages. No masks. Just a plan. Frenchie slipped them the key. Jimmy told them to bring the biggest suitcase they could find. And near midnight, while the night guard walked to the cafeteria for a sandwich, Tommy and Henry strolled through the terminal like 2 men looking for lost luggage. The simplicity was the genius. Down a hallway, through a locked door, into a room stacked with money like dead weight waiting to be lifted. They filled the suitcase. No alarms. No footsteps. No heartbeat from the law. By the time the sun came up, $420,000 had vanished. Air France called the police days later, too late. The Mafia didn't often find bloodless solutions, but when they did, they savored them. This heist made Tommy a star in the underworld. It wasn't just the money. It was the style. Walk in empty-handed. Walk out rich. No bodies left cooling on concrete. Men talked. Stories grew. And Tommy loved it. He was now known not just as a killer, but as a man who could take what he wanted from anyone, including an entire airport. Admiration followed him like cigarette smoke. Men bought him drinks, asked for advice, studied his cold eyes to learn how to be unshakable. But admiration is a dangerous fuel. It heats the ego. It blinds the mind. And the more respect Tommy earned, the darker he became. By the early 1970s, people whispered that his temper was no longer controllable. He could be laughing with friends and a second later beating a man into the floorboards. His fuse wasn't short. It didn't exist. A spark was enough. A joke was enough. A look was enough. Henry Hill once said that Tommy didn't kill to survive. He killed because he didn't care about surviving. And here is where fear begins to replace admiration. Because power is intoxicating. But unpredictability? That terrifies even criminals. Which brings us into the most infamous chapter of his life. The murders that defined him, shaped his legacy, and sealed his fate. The incident that echoes through Mafia history, like a gunshot in an empty alley, began in a bar. A simple welcome home party. Drinks poured like water. Laughter thick as cigar smoke. And then, A voice cut through the room. A familiar voice. A voice that belonged to a man the Mafia considered untouchable. Billy Batts. A made man in the Gambino family. Returning from prison. Celebrated. Respected. Protected. Tommy smiled when he saw him, or tried to. But Billy knew Tommy when he was just a kid shining shoes for men like him. And Billy, maybe drunk, maybe nostalgic, maybe careless, said the one thing no man should say to Tommy. Go get your shine box. 6 words. 6 tiny words. And a bomb went off behind Tommy's eyes. Everyone felt the temperature drop. Tommy held himself together, barely. He forced a laugh. Walked away. But inside him, fury curled like smoke ready to ignite. He waited until later that night, when the bar emptied, when Billy relaxed, when everyone thought the moment had passed. Then he returned. A gun. A rage older than reason. And fists so violent they broke more than bone. They beat Billy Batts until he fell limp and unrecognizable. They stuffed his body into a trunk, intending to bury him where no one would ever find him. But the ground has a way of remembering. The Mafia has a way of avenging their own. And killing a made man, without permission, is a death sentence. Tommy didn't care. Or maybe he believed he was above consequence. Either way, the sands beneath his feet began to shift. Time passed. Fear multiplied. And then another moment stained his name forever. Spider. He was young. Barely more than a kid. Serving drinks, running errands, trying to survive in a world built for wolves. Tommy teased him. Pressed him. Pushed him. Maybe to break him in. Maybe to amuse himself. One day, Spider talked back. He muttered a retort. Quiet but defiant. Something men twice Tommy's size would never dare. And instead of laughing it off, instead of letting a kid speak, Tommy lifted his gun and fired. Not once. Several times. Spider hit the floor. A boy dead because a killer didn't like the sound of bravery. The room froze. Men who had watched murders without blinking felt sick. Jimmy Burke yelled. Henry Hill stood stunned. Others stared, unable to process what had just torn through the air. Tommy rolled his shoulders, holstered his weapon, and said something so chilling that the room might as well have dropped 10 degrees. What's the matter? I thought you wanted me to shoot him. Not guilty. Not remorseful. Not human. Just cold. And if the killing of Billy Batts sealed his fate, the murder of Spider carved the epitaph. But before justice or vengeance could find Tommy, more blood spilled.
Dominic Sersani.
A man close to Jimmy Burke.
Trusted. Loyal.
But when Burke suspected betrayal, he ordered Tommy to silence that doubt. They took Sersani for a drive, the kind you don't return from. Tommy wrapped a cord around his neck and squeezed.
Slowly.
Methodically. As Burke watched. No hesitation. No tremor in the hands. Just pressure and patience. Sersani vanished from the world, buried beneath Robert's lounge. Another ghost, unremembered by anyone except those who sent him there. Then came Foxy, Ronald Giroux, a man who threatened Tommy after hearing he had beaten his sister. And this was personal. Tommy went to his apartment, knocked on the door. And when Foxy answered, Tommy shot him 3 times in the face. Cold logic. Hot anger. Zero restraint. Each kill further untethered him from sanity. Each death strengthened his reputation as someone even the Mafia hesitated to stand near. But here's where the contradiction lives, and where we introduce the first twist in this man's psychology. Tommy, the killer with ice in his blood, had a tattoo on his arm, a cross, with the words in memory of Pop. Sentimentality.
Love. Grief.
A reminder that inside the monster lived a son who once mourned. A human who once felt something soft enough to mark on his skin forever. And maybe that's the most haunting part of his legacy. Not that he was pure evil, but that he was capable of love while choosing violence instead. Spider. Billy Batts.
Sersani.
Foxy. Names erased from life, etched into history only because they crossed paths with a man who became more storm than flesh. His legend grew, not through admiration anymore, but through dread. Men lowered their voices when speaking his name. Bar stools emptied when he walked in the door. People avoided eye contact, not out of respect, but survival. Because at this point in his life, Tommy DeSimone was no longer simply a criminal. He was a weapon. One without a safety switch. One pointed wherever impulse aimed. And now, the audience, the streets, the Mafia themselves ask the same question. How long can a man like that live? But before the answer comes, before fate claws its way toward him, we pause at the most emotional point in this story yet. A young man named Spider lies lifeless in the floorboards of memory. Blood spilled over a moment of courage. A gun fired not for profit, but ego. If you believe some lines should never be crossed, if you believe a kid like Spider deserved better, comment justice for Spider. Because silence is how men like Tommy survive. And remembering his victims is how we keep their ghosts from fading. He had spilled blood. He had stolen fortunes. He had survived trials, bullets, betrayals. Yet through all of it, something kept him alive. Luck.
Fear.
Or maybe the belief that he was untouchable. By the late 1970s, Thomas DeSimone had committed murder after murder, robbery after robbery, and walked away clean every time. But then the state finally put hands on him, a hijacking charge that sent him to federal prison in 1975. And many thought that would be the end of the violent streak, the final cooling of a raging storm. But storms don't end in silence. Sometimes they shrink into the distance, only to come back bigger, darker, and devastating. Tommy was transferred in 1978 from a structured federal prison to something far looser, a halfway house in Manhattan. A place meant to ease prisoners back into society. A place built on trust. And that trust was a mistake.
He could walk the streets, drink,
Meet with old friends. Disappear for hours with no one questioning where he'd been. And when he came back late, paperwork was smoothed with bribes and nods. He was an inmate who was not confined, a wolf walking past unlocked doors. He looked free. But freedom for a man like Tommy was gasoline poured on open flame. His associates welcomed him like a weapon returned to the drawer. Henry Hill, Jimmy Burke, the crew at Robert's Lounge. Together again, like they'd never stopped. And soon, whispers drifted through backrooms and hangouts, growing louder each week. There was something huge coming, bigger than Air France, bigger than any hijacking New York had ever seen. Millions, pure cash, mounted on pallets inside JFK Airport like bricks of solid opportunity. And when opportunity calls men like Tommy, they answer with both hands. This was Lufthansa, the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. Jimmy Burke was the architect, the strategist. Henry Hill was the connective tissue, linking men, smoothing edges. But Tommy? Tommy was the blade. They planned like surgeons, studied shift changes, bribed insiders, timed deliveries to the minute. The heist wasn't born in a smoky room or on a bar napkin. It was engineered, methodical, clinical. December 11th, 1978. Before sunrise, men in masks moved through the airport like a shadow with purpose. No shouting, no chaos. Guns controlled hands and hearts. They cut into the cargo building cleanly, like it was a loaf of bread. The guards were tied, but not brutalized. The mission wasn't pain, it was profit. And profit came in mountains. Over $5 million in cash. Nearly $1 million in jewels. A score so large it changed the underworld economy overnight. They loaded the van with money that didn't feel real, weight heavy like iron, value bright like lightning. Years of risk, pressure, adrenaline paid in one night. A robbery pulled off not with recklessness, but precision. When Tommy and Jimmy and the crew walked away from that job, the world didn't know it yet, but history had shifted.
Newspapers would write about it.
Hollywood would dramatize it. But the truth behind it, the cold, calculated simplicity, was more impressive than the myth. Tommy had reached the top of the mountain. And that is where every fall begins. Because the money wasn't safe. Not really. Money, that big breeds paranoia. Jealousy.
Fear.
Silence that grows teeth. And it began quickly. Cars too new. Coats too expensive. Wives wearing fur to dinner like trophies. Jimmy Burke watched all of it, jaw clenched tight. Men were spending money they shouldn't have touched yet. Buying flash instead of keeping quiet. Heat rose. FBI vans circled like vultures. And Burke, the man Tommy trusted like a brother, made a decision that would stain every page of crime history after this. Anyone who became a liability would disappear. And disappear they did. One by one, like dominoes on fire. The first body fell, then another, friends turning into corpses overnight. Associates stopped answering phones. Men who laughed in bars weeks before were found frozen in trunks in winter. Anyone who talked too much. Anyone who spent too much. Anyone who might betray. No trial. No forgiveness. No warning. And at the center of this tightening circle of death stood Tommy DeSimone. He didn't know it yet, but the blade he sharpened for years was now turning back toward him. The fatal spiral quickened when a man named Stax Edwards, part of the Lufthansa operation, made a mistake that would cost him everything. His job was simple: move the getaway van to a scrap yard in New Jersey, where it would vanish like smoke. But Stax got high, went home, and left the van parked in the street. Fingerprints everywhere. A neon sign pointing to the killers. Jimmy Burke's rage was silent, the most dangerous kind. And he sent Tommy to clean it. Early morning. Apartment door. Tommy entered swift, like violence given legs. 5 shots into Stack's head, clean, efficient, absolute. A friend eliminated because he slipped. This was the last confirmed killing attributed to Tommy DeSimone. And after that morning, the world began to tilt around him. He was a man surrounded by ghosts he helped create. Friends he killed. Friends others killed to protect the secret haul from Lufthansa. Paranoia settled over the crew like winter fog. No one trusted anyone. No one knew who would vanish next. Tommy moved with tension under his skin like electricity, pacing, smoking, waiting for his reward. Because through all of this, through every shot fired, every body disappeared, Tommy believed he was headed toward glory. He'd been promised something. Something bigger than money. Something bigger than fear. He thought he was about to become a made man. And in the Mafia, that is a crown. A lifetime pass. A badge of honor that says no one can touch you without permission. Tommy dressed for the ceremony like a man walking into paradise. His eyes bright. His swagger loud. His future certain. But instead of honor, he was walking toward death. Because the families had not forgotten Billy Batts. They had not forgotten Foxy. They had not forgiven Tommy for spilling Mafia blood he wasn't authorized to spill. Billy Batts was a made man. And Tommy killed him. That alone was a death sentence. Jimmy Burke knew it. Paul Vario knew it. The Gambinos knew it. But Tommy, hungry, trusting, blind with ambition, walked toward the meeting anyway. He climbed into the car believing he'd return wearing a new title. Instead, he vanished. No farewell. No burial. No body. He simply ceased to exist. Before we unravel what might have happened to him, before we lift the shroud, let the enormity of the moment settle. The most feared young outlaw in New York walked into his initiation and never walked out again. And if you're still with me, if you're still breathing in this story, then you already feel the tension tightening around him. You already know we stand on the edge of answers the world has chased for decades. So, before we descend into the final shadows, take a moment. A moment to claim the truth over the myth. Like this video so more people learn the truth, not the Hollywood rewrite. Because history deserves honesty. And Tommy's end deserves light, not legend. Now we go deeper. When Tommy disappeared, shock rippled through the underworld. Buried information surfaced in whispers, each one different, each one laced with blood. Theory 1. Tommy was taken to a quiet basement by the Lucchese family. The same men he served. The same men who promised him honor. Instead of ceremony, there was judgment. Instead of celebration, there was execution. 1 bullet. Maybe 3. A quick death. A clean message. A life ended as repayment for Billy Batts. Mafia justice delivered like scripture. Theory 2 is colder. Some believe Jimmy Burke, the mentor Tommy idolized, ordered his murder. Not out of revenge for bats, but out of fear that Tommy might talk. The Lufthansa money was too big. The FBI pressure too tight. Loose ends get cut. And Burke, paranoid and calculating, may have watched his protege disappear to protect himself. Loyalty is currency. Expendable men are change. But Theory 3 is the darkest. According to mob informant Joe Iannuzzi, Tommy didn't die quickly. He walked into a house expecting brotherhood, and instead found John Gotti waiting. Bats had been Gotti's friend.
His ally.
His man. And Gotti wasn't interested in clean revenge. Some claim Tommy was tortured slowly.
Beaten. Cut.
Made to feel every life he took. Begging. Screaming. Silenced. Others say Gotti himself shot him 3 times in the skull, efficient, final, ending years of chaos in seconds. No witnesses. No remains. No closure. Just rumor, thick and heavy as grave soil. But whatever the truth, one fact stands like a gravestone in the dark. Thomas DeSimone was never seen again. The Mafia knew. The street knew. The families whispered. The government did not. To law enforcement, Tommy became a fugitive. A missing inmate. A ghost they chased with warrants and paperwork, long after he was already below earth or ocean or concrete. Years passed. Decades.
Still no body.
Searches were run. Confessions whispered. But nothing surfaced. Some think he lies in a mafia dumping ground known only as the Hole, the place where bones are buried like trash, where memories dissolve in dirt. They dug there in 2005 after Banano boss Joe Messino turned informant. They found bodies, but not Tommy. Maybe he's there, deeper than anyone dug. Maybe he was moved. Maybe he was burned. Maybe he was dissolved. Maybe, and this is the cruelest maybe, he never had a grave at all. Because erasing a man like Tommy is the final victory. No headstone. No coffin. No story, unless someone tells it. He wanted to be remembered for fear. He wanted to walk into rooms and silence them by presence alone. He wanted immortality through terror. But in the end, he vanished like a whisper. No monument. No funeral crowd. No flowers. Just the wind moving across forgotten earth where a body may, or may not, sleep. And now we arrive at the final breath of the story. Not with gunfire. Not with glory. But with silence. If you believe no criminal legacy lasts forever, share the story. If you believe the forgotten dead deserve truth, comment. No more ghosts. Because remembering him is not honoring him. It is closing a chapter that lived too long in shadow. And with this, Tommy DeSimone's story ends, not with the bang he lived by, but with the fade he earned. He wanted fear. He earned disappearance. He chased immortality. He received oblivion. He wanted to be remembered through terror. But in the end, he vanished like a whisper. If you enjoy true crime stories told like a movie, subscribe to Crime Syndicate Tales, where power always has a price. Subscribe for the next Mafia tale. Like and comment more Mafia stories to unlock the next story.